We don't see too much of that these days, which means we're filming outside today. So one of the things that every Christian or missionary that seeks to move overseas for the purpose of teaching the gospel needs to do before moving is really weighing out and considering the risks in contrast to the needs and the opportunities. I feel like that's a responsible thing to do, especially if you're bringing your wife and your family abroad with you. And one of the challenges of considering those risks is a lot of the times the risks that are present in the foreign country you're considering moving to are not the same risks you grew up with. And so you're really at a disadvantage in accurately considering those risks and weighing those things out because you don't really know much about those things. And one of those common challenges that are difficult for us to be able to think about beforehand is the illnesses and diseases that are more typical in underdeveloped countries versus what we're used to in the Western world. And so today I want to shed just a little bit of light, if I can, upon the specific illness and disease of malaria. And so this is something that our family has been living in Sierra Leone for almost 2 years, and we have come down with malaria 4 times total. Myself twice, my wife once, and then our then 2-year-old daughter once. And so that gives us a little bit of experience to be able to share kind of our firsthand knowledge of what it's like. What is malaria? How do you prevent it? How do you treat it? How should you be weighing this risk as you're considering moving abroad or making a visit of some sort? I should probably just share right off the bat here that I am not a doctor. I've not had any formal training in treatment of malaria. I just have my own personal firsthand experience of us living in a country where malaria is very prevalent, that we have had several encounters with malaria personally, and so that's kind of the source of where I'm sharing these things from. So don't take it too seriously. Google's your friend. Visiting a doctor from a travel clinic will probably be the most helpful clinical opinion you can get about malaria, but just keep that in mind. So either me or my wife or my child getting sick with a disease or illness that we are unfamiliar with is probably one of the most stressful and anxiety-inducing aspects of living abroad for us, and specifically for me. I think most of the fear that I have experienced over these past 2 years of living abroad has been related to that. However, through personal experience and through, like I said, us going through several encounters with malaria, thanks be to God, we've been able to overcome those, and we've felt so much more confident regarding our ability to self-diagnose, to be able to treat, to be able to prevent, be able to, understand when we need to take more drastic measures. And that really gives us a level of peace and confidence that we didn't have before. And so I'm hoping me sharing some of these things would be able to provide that same thing for someone else who is similarly unfamiliar with malaria and is considering moving abroad. Okay, so first I'm going to answer the question, what exactly is malaria? Malaria is an illness that is a result of a mosquito-transmitted parasite. And so once bitten by a mosquito that is carrying this parasite, the parasite will travel directly into your liver, where for about a period of 2 or 3 weeks, it will go unnoticed. There's no symptoms related to it while it's multiplying in your liver. Eventually, the number of parasites will grow so much where they will enter your bloodstream and attack your red blood cells, and that's when you'll start feeling it. So the very first symptoms that you'll be feeling, at least in our experience, has been body aches, pretty severe body aches, the shoulders, the back, the neck especially, even headaches. This is something that typically the day that I have malaria, that's the first symptom I'll feel, and I'll think that I slept wrong on my neck, or I'll feel like I kind of twisted my back working or something, but then it comes up later on that I have malaria. So that's typically the very first symptom we feel, followed maybe within 5 hours of fever. And so fever is the number one indicator. If you have a high temperature, then that's an immediate red flag to go ahead and get yourself tested. Beyond that, obviously headaches, fatigue, loss of appetite, and then the more complicated symptoms are going to be extreme shakes and chills, and then excessive sweating. Sometimes you'll be in bed, and then for about half an hour to an hour, you're just shaking uncontrollably, and then the next hour, you're completely soaking through all your sheets because you're sweating so much. And so those are kind of the indicators, at least to us, that things are getting pretty bad. And so if you can prevent yourself from getting to the point of extreme shakes and extreme sweating, then we kind of feel like we're a little bit ahead of the malaria. If we begin to feel those symptoms, then we know that more drastic measures are probably required and needed. A few other kind of fun facts about malaria is that only a specific type of mosquito is capable of carrying malaria. I'm not even sure many of you knew that there are different types of mosquitoes, but in Sierra Leone at least, there are mosquitoes that bite during the daytime, and then a different type of mosquito that bites at night. And only those kind of dusk till dawn mosquitoes carry the malaria, or can carry the malaria, and then only the female of that type of mosquito can carry and infect malaria. So that's kind of an interesting thing to consider. So actually there are several different variations of malaria, just like that we're learning about like with COVID and things like that. It's kind of a mutating, evolving sort of parasite. And so that means that the medication also needs to evolve and needs to be adjusted and changed. And that also means that there are different types and strands of this parasite and malaria throughout the world. And so depending upon where you're at, they're going to give you a different type of anti-malarial, different treatment, because there's a certain type of malaria in that region that you need to be able to specifically treat. But that also means that even here in Sierra Leone, after maybe a few decades, then they'll actually be introducing a different type of medication. So the medication is always trying to keep up to date with the mutating version of malaria within that region. Malaria is super common in subtropical areas, and so you'll see it in Southeast Asia, certainly South America, India, but it's probably most closely associated and most common in Africa. The countries with the highest kind of infection rate or contraction rate of malaria are typically here in Africa, and so it's super common. And I'll just share this, that everyone here in Sierra Leone has had malaria. No one here has gone their entire life without it. In fact, my experience is that, and I'm estimating here, that everyone gets malaria pretty frequently. And so it's kind of like a once a year, once every year and a half sort of thing. And so it's kind of like the seasonal flu. It's more common for someone to get malaria during the rainy season because that's the mosquito mating season. It's more common during that time period. But this is something that everyone has come to expect. However, the more times that you contract malaria, the more your body is able to defend against it and is used to that. Therefore, the less extreme symptoms you'll typically experience. There are exceptions to that, of course. And so that is something that even I experienced. I've had malaria twice. The second time was much more mild than the first, and I'm hoping that trend will continue as we go on. But it's still necessary to be able to diagnose and treat in a timely fashion. So let's go ahead and talk about how to prevent malaria. So if you're taking short-term trips to a country that has a risk of malaria, then typically you'll be prescribed with an anti-malarial medication, oral tablets that you'll take either daily or weekly, maybe some time period before you leave, during your trip, and then when you get back. And in my experience, these are very effective. A lot of people that have taken them have never had a problem with them, minimal side effects. However, unfortunately, there's not been a vaccine or some sort of medication that is a great option for long-term preventative care regarding malaria. And so the idea of taking weekly or daily tablets for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years doesn't seem to be a very good practical choice. And even I have some reservations about taking medication that frequently, that much medication over long term, especially with children, and just kind of wondering what that does to certain organs. And so we take other steps to prevent malaria besides the anti-malarials. Things like mosquito nets are a must. Things like as soon as it gets toward that dusk time period, we come inside. Both our kids know what it means when we say mosquito hour. That means it's getting to the time where those nighttime biting mosquitoes are coming out, so we go inside. And things like obviously mosquito spray. If we are out during that time period, making sure we're wearing long sleeves, long pants, things like that. And so these things are just trying to prevent as many bites from those mosquitoes that could possibly carry that parasite. But unfortunately, there's no preventative care for malaria that is 100% successful, especially for those who are living here long term, which is obviously increasing the likelihood that they're going to contract malaria. And so when you get malaria, how do you treat it? Well, the first thing you can do to really set you up for an advantageous treatment of malaria is catch it as soon as possible. Just like with any other disease or illness, the earlier you're able to catch it, the quicker you're able to treat it, and the less likely it is that there will be a complication regarding that. And so because of the need to be as quick as possible in diagnosing, we actually have purchased an at-home rapid diagnosis kind of kit. And so it's really simple. They're disposable malaria test kits. Let's see. And all it is just a blood. You prick your finger with, let me get some of these here. You prick your finger with one of these guys. It's always fun. And then you have a little stopper here. You take the blood from your finger, you put it in the one hole. The other hole you pour 4 drops of like a saline solution, and then you wait 15-20 minutes. And so we have a pack, we bought like a pack of 50 of these, and so anytime at all, when any one of our family gets a fever, immediately we test. And that's something that we've tried to condition our children just to get used to, finger pricks. This is something that whenever mama or papa need to take a test, we always include the children so they know this is a normal thing. We try to make it a more normal experience for them so they're not so scared of that when it's their turn, when they need those things. And so we found these to be fairly accurate. This way we don't need to wait until the morning to go to the doctor or go to someplace to get tested. As soon as we feel fever, as soon as we're feeling some symptoms, we're able to test. And that means the sooner we're able to diagnose, the sooner we're able to treat. However, I will say the most accurate way of testing is actually not a rapid diagnosis test, but actually being able to look through a microscope. And so that means that if we're feeling malaria-like symptoms, but this comes back negative, probably what we'll do is we will retake these tests every like 8 to 10 hours. And if more symptoms come up that strongly indicate malaria, we will start treating and taking medication for malaria even without a positive test. That's kind of the approach of the doctors and hospitals and clinics here. That's something that we've done and felt good about. Most of the time, typically though, you can see the results do come back positive if we do have it. And then as far as treatment goes, this is just an over-the-counter medication. You don't need prescriptions here. This costs $2, equivalent in US. And it's about 4 days, 3 or 4 days to complete the dosages of that medication. And our experience has been that if we take the medication within 6 to 8 hours of getting a fever, then typically we'll feel miserable for 2 days, but on the 3rd day is when we'll get relief. Now we'll still feel fatigued, we'll still not have a full appetite, but typically we'll feel some pretty significant improvements from that. One other thing I'll add about the medication, it's really important to take the full dosage even after you start feeling a little bit better. One of the most deceiving and challenging things about malaria is the fact that it can go in kind of peaks and valleys where you'll feel terrible for about 18 hours, 16 hours, and then you'll have like a 8 to 6 hour period of relief where the fever kind of eases a little bit, you get a little more of your appetite, a little more energy, and then that kind of tricks you into thinking that you're getting better when really you're not. It's just the normal rhythm of the malaria. And so that's actually what happened to me the first time I got malaria. I went through some pretty low valleys of feeling terrible, but then I feel a little bit better. And I said, okay, now I don't need to go to the hospital, I don't need to go to the doctor because I'm feeling better, the medication's kicking in, when really it wasn't. I was getting worse and worse and worse. And so really be on your guard not to be deceived by feeling good for just a short period of time. I think whenever we start improving, our symptoms start improving, we're kind of a little bit reserved in feeling optimistic regarding our progress, because we're going to wait to see if that period of relief can extend to like 16, 18, 20 hours. If you start feeling good for an entire day, then typically that means that you're over the hump. And this portion of the video, talking about how we treat malaria, really wouldn't be complete if I didn't talk about prayer and our reliance upon God during these psychologically difficult times. When we're experiencing something we're unfamiliar with, we don't have a whole lot of confidence regarding what we're doing, it's been really important for us to lean upon God. And so we pray a lot during those times of illness. We ask for prayers. We have a pretty quick trigger to reach out to both our families and ask them to be praying for us. It's a blessing knowing that both of our families are devoted to prayer on our behalf, and so we just know as soon as we send those texts or those emails, people are praying for us. A lot of people are praying for us, so we're thankful for that. I personally have a playlist in my phone of hymns that I think are very encouraging and mentally helpful and spiritually helpful for me, really focusing my mind on certain things that I need to be reminded of during those challenging days of either being sick or my family being sick. And so relying upon God, trusting Him, being built up through song and through prayer, through scripture, is really important for us psychologically as we encounter the difficulty of either us personally being sick or one of our kids being sick. And so can't leave that one out. Well, I hope this kind of demystifies at least some of what malaria is like and what we do to prevent it and how we treat it. I'm sure, unfortunately, I'll, in the coming years, be able to post other videos regarding other West African common diseases, but I'm in no rush to get experience on those, but we'll see. Thanks so much for watching, for your guys' care and what we're doing here, and I'll catch you in the next video.